one of the most important barriers to biodiversity conservation is that people are less and less connected to nature, and so they don't care about conserving it. And so I think just one of the most fundamental things that we can do is just get people back out in nature and experience all the benefits of it, just reducing anxiety and exercising outdoors and the clean air and appreciating that biodiversity, all the different plants and animals. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do is just re-engage people to nature.
This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Tidal Influence, a Californian ecological consulting firm who proudly supports environmental education and all of the diverse conservation efforts that Pelecanus works to highlight. Visit their website at tidalinfluence.com to learn more about what they do to conserve our coastal resources and how you can get involved. Hello everyone and welcome to Pelecanus. Pelecanus is a nonprofit organization focused on sharing the movement that is and has been happening in the conservation field. Now this is Conservation Conversations, our long-form documentary-style show that highlights the people and organizations that are making it their purpose to grow the conservation field and to show that people have and still are making monumental differences in our world with intentional change. Head over to pelecanus.org to find all of our episodes and more. In this Conservation Conversation episode, we talk with Dr. Denise Knapp, who serves as the Director of Conservation and Research for the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden in Santa Barbara, California, a nonprofit botanic garden whose mission is to conserve California native plants and habitats for the health and well-being of people and the planet. They do this through their 4 key tenets of understanding biodiversity, protecting rare plants, restoring habitats, and engaging and mentoring their community. Now let's let Dr. Knapp explain how each of these programs help conserve native plants in and around Santa Barbara County and the Channel Islands. All right, well again, thank you so much for joining us. Do you mind, just to kind of start things off, just kind of saying your name, your title, and kind of what you do at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden?
Sure, yeah. I'm Denise Knapp. I'm the Director of Conservation and Research at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, and I'm a community ecologist, so I study plant-insect interactions and habitat restoration, invasive species, but also I do a lot of administration, so writing grant proposals and attending meetings and things like that.
The fun stuff.
Yeah.
I guess we'll kind of just dive right into the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. I was just looking at the website and I'd never been to it, and seeing the conservation center, the beautiful building it is. It's like I really want to go now. And so again, looking at your website here, if you click on the What We Do page, there's 4 big tenets that I'm seeing here that says understand biodiversity, conserve rare plants, restore habitats, and engage and mentor. If you don't mind, can you dive into how do those 4 tenets manifest themselves?
Yeah, that's our mantra, is understand, protect, restore, and advocate or engage. So I think of it as layers of a cake, sort of. So the base layer being, if your mission is to conserve California native plants like ours is, then first you have to know what those are. So our botanists basically study and describe those species. They're the ones who determine this is this species, this is that, this is how you tell the difference. Here's a flora to help you do that. Here's the distribution of these things. Here's how we know these things are rare. All of those patterns, here's what communities they form, and all that basic stuff. And of course the genetics, that's such an important component of that these days. Then the protect part is the rare plants. So once we know which plants are rare, our goal is just to make sure that nothing on our watch in our region goes extinct. And so if that's as simple as taking conservation seed collections and getting them in our freezer and just making sure that we have that backup, then that's the most elemental thing that we can do. But ideally, we'll recover those species in the wild, because a lot of things are rare because of what humans have done. So rare plant conservation is actually really hard and takes a long time and complicated. The problem can be anywhere from the genetic level to the ecosystem level. And so we like to say that we do work from genes to ecosystems. We can tackle things anywhere along that spectrum. And so that can involve research and recovery and growing things in our nursery and just getting new populations started, all kinds of things. Then the next layer is the restoring habitat, and that's newer for the garden. But really, in this is the era of restoration. It's no longer enough just to set land aside. We really need that healthy, diverse habitat to support that web of life and all the services that's provided to us as humans. And so figuring out how best to do that really is the main thing at the garden, and then getting involved in doing it. And we're starting to engage volunteers in doing that work, which then leads to just that advocacy piece and engaging people in making the world a better place. Which leads to that last layer, which is advocating, engaging. We help on all kinds of different committees and working groups and steering groups and advisory groups. And sometimes we comment on projects that we have something to say about. We do a lot of just getting out and giving lectures and field trips and workshops and things like that. We do a lot of mentoring, working with interns as much as we can, getting them involved with the different things that we do. A lot of our interns and technicians have gone on to grad school. And so just the gamut, I see that as kind of the crunchy layer, the icing on that cake, those 3 layers.
That's huge. Like, I was looking at this website, and I obviously knew a little bit about what you guys did, but diving deeper, it's a lot. And so as a director, and as you mentioned, you kind of go from genes to ecosystems. As a director, when you're in charge of that, I would struggle, like, how would you even try to manage all the different projects that would include, because like, I could see how you could just go, I'm just going to dive into genetics, I'm going to dive into ecosystems, or one of these things, and that's plenty to do. So how do you kind of tackle that? Do you have different strategies? Do you have a mindset?
I think the key is having really good people. So I, think very carefully about who we hire, and we've really just got a great team. And so I don't have to dive into the minutia of, I'm not a geneticist. I wouldn't be able to take on that role. That's fully our biodiversity staff, which includes our systematist, our conservation geneticist, and technicians. We also have a lichenologist. So they do that. And I just watch and learn and enjoy. Then we have our rare plants team. We have our rare plant biologist and a technician. And while I do some rare plant work, actually on the ecology level, that's one of those layers that sometimes comes into play when you're conserving a rare plant. Is does it have the pollinators that it needs to be able to reproduce and produce seeds? And so we do pollinator network studies and all kinds of things to look at that layer. There's, just the ecosystem layer of, is the fire regime changed? Is the hydrology regime changed? What's it going to take to bring this plant back? And that's where our biodiversity team comes in as well, doing population genetics and looking at that layer to make sure that there's enough genetic diversity in a population to have that cross-pollination, to have successful seed set. It's complicated. There's a lot of layers. So I'm involved a little bit in that. Of course, I see all the contracts and projects come through and talk about them and all that. But really, I'm most involved with what we call the ecology team, the habitat restoration team.
I guess just to kind of dive deeper into each of those tenets we talked about. When it comes to, for the first one example, understanding biodiversity, there's a little section there about black holes. And when I first read that, I was like, now they're into cosmology. So I was like, okay. Do you mind to explain kind of what a conservation black hole is?
Sure, and that's a great example project of where these layers can come together. So when Matt, our systematist, came to the garden, When he was considering the job, he looked like a good botanist should at, like what's known for this region, and pulled up all the records of specimens for this region and noticed what he immediately termed botanical black holes. Basically, there's specimens taken all over, but with these really noticeable gaps. And that, for instance, that might be in the Los Padres National Forest, where the terrain is just really rugged and it's just really hard to get out there with a plant press and lug all kinds of plants back out. And so he called those botanical black holes. And the project that we talk about on the website is what we saw as an opportunity to fill in some of those black holes. And the opportunity was because of some wildfires that happened in this area, the Jesucita fire and the Zaca fire. The Zaca fire burned over 240,000 acres. It was one of the largest fires in recorded history at the time. Of course, it hasn't been that long, but that's been eclipsed since then. And the idea was, okay, let's get out and figure out what are the plants out there. But beyond that, the goal of the funding opportunity was to try to restore habitat, to look for threats and problems in that area. So first we're looking at the botany. Second, we've got a list of over 40 rare plants that we're looking for, and we're taking all kinds of information about those populations so we can, understand better, which are most at risk. And then we're looking for invasive plant species, which is one of the greatest threats to biodiversity. So we've also got a long list of weeds that we're keeping an eye out for, and we're taking all kinds of data about those when we find them. So in the end, we put all those data together and we look for either weeds that are new to an area that just have a few populations. We could potentially eradicate them. That's the best way to deal with weeds, just nip them in the bud. Or if they're too far gone to do that, we look for areas where they're really threatening rare plants, and we can control them in those areas to at least, maintain that biodiversity. So that's an example of a project that really involves a lot of us in the department and touches on all three of those layers.
Yeah, it's a great way to bring the whole wide variety of the team together to do one really awesome project. And you kind of talked a little bit about your specimens and the word, I'm blanking on the actual word, but I guess that kind of leads into your rare plant program. When you take the vouchers, that's the word, as you're taking the vouchers, like how many, like how large is your collection and how long has it been collected? And is your geographic area like constrained to the Santa Barbara area, the Los Padres?
So our herbarium has over 150,000 specimens in it, and they can be from all over California, but mostly our turf is the Central Coast and the Channel Islands of California. So mostly Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Ventura counties, and then all 8 California Channel Islands we've been working on for a long time. So we're the institution, the official repository for herbarium specimens for Channel Islands National Park, for example. So the garden's been around since the 1920s, and we've had the botany going since the early days. We have specimens as old as the late 1800s, though.
Wow. I guess that kind of segue into the Channel Islands, since you guys are, the head honcho for plants in the Channel Islands. What is special about the Channel Islands when it comes to the plant life?
Yeah, so much is special about the Channel Islands. As far as the plant life and the animal life, there are so many endemic species on the islands that are found nowhere else. There's over 100 different taxa of plants that are unique to the islands, whether it be one island or multiple islands. So they're special in that way. They have diverse habitats and just a really wonderful kind of marine influenced ecosystem. And maybe they've been hammered by humans, but there's a lot of conservation work going on, so they're special for that too. Another thing that's really cool about the islands, they just have things happen on islands where you have plants that are a little more, have more pink flowers, or you have more gray foliage, or you have gigantism, you have dwarfism, and so it's just a different world. It's really neat.
Yeah, I have to say that I think Santa Barbara is one of my favorite places I've ever been, and I still plan on moving there eventually. But Unfortunately, I've never been to the Channel Islands. I've been to Catalina a couple times, as a kid camping or whatever, and it's been a huge bucket list item where I can't seem to tick it off.
It'll
uh,
happen. It'll happen. At the very least, you can do an Anakepa day trip.
oh
That's
yeah,
easy to tick off. Yeah.
that's the really small one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the second smallest and
Oh,
the closest. So it makes it easier to do a day trip.
yeah. Yeah. You kind of already mentioned like the big picture that you want, why you want to restore habitats, but looking at the section, I was kind of blown away by the Hedgerows program. And would you just mind giving a kind of a background of why the hedgerow program exists and why it's important, what it actually does?
Sure. Yeah. Well, our farms are a really huge use of land in America and the world. So it's a really important influence on our biodiversity. It can reduce it, or we can try to work with nature. And hedgerows are not a new concept, but they're coming back in vogue. It's the idea of providing some habitat on the farm to support pollinators and other pest control insects that can really make your farm more sustainable. So hedgerows do not only those two things, but they also can provide windbreaks so you can retain soil more. So they're a really sustainable practice for farms, and they've been shown to increase pollination services. Basically, you're providing habitat year-round for the pollinators to live. You're providing, food plants essentially with the nectar, but also nesting habitat, because if you're always plowing up your fields, you're plowing up the nesting habitat for all the solitary bees. 70% of our bees are solitary bees that are ground nesters. So you're just providing them a place to stay all year, so then they can pollinate your crops, and you don't have to truck in honeybees to do that job, which along with all kinds of pollinators around the globe are struggling. So it's just a sustainable practice. It's one of the tools in the toolbox to make farming as sustainable as possible. It goes hand in hand with using no or fewer pesticides and having diverse crops on your farm to provide some resilience and not have this big monoculture that is, you know, supporting fewer critters, less diversity.
It seems like a good way to kind of use old tactics to push conservation forward when it comes to agriculture. Where have you guys implemented this?
So this practice is being used more and more in Northern California, so around sort of Davis and Sacramento. And like I said, it's been shown to work to improve pollination services, and so much so that you can recoup the costs of taking land out of production in just a few years. But it's less used down here in Southern California. And so really we just wanted to get some demonstration hedgerows going on some farms around here and spread the practice by seeing its benefits, so that the farmers can see the changes that are happening, and we can study how the insects change, and then those farmers can tell two friends, because that's really they're less impressed by scientific papers and more impressed by their neighbor saying, hey, I saw this work. So we have 3 different farms in the area that we've been working with to plant native plants in a linear form. That's a lot of shrubs. That's what a hedgerow is, and just provide that habitat year round.
So to finish off your cake that you mentioned, I guess this would be the icing on the cake, the Engage and Mentor section program. What kind of programs do you employ to provide that community service?
Well, we do a range of things. We're on soft money, and so we have to work to raise our own salaries for contracts and things. But whenever we can, we're really fitting in, giving public lectures. I go and lecture to UCSB, couple UCSB classes, conservation ecology and things. We bring tours through to really just kind of come through the labs and the herbarium and show what we do, and do some show and tell with some of our specimens. Like I said, we don't have a formal funded internship program, but we do have interns that come through that either have support from their university or are willing to volunteer their time. And we try to give them a diverse experience, and we're working on a funded internship program. What else do we do? We have a conservation symposium that happens every year. So we have an honoree, someone who's just a rock star in conservation of biodiversity, and we bring them in as the keynote and give them an award and a nice honoree video, and about 6 other speakers on a given topic each year. This last year we focused on getting kids back out into nature, and it was just a really great day. We honored Richard Louv, who's an author talking about nature deficit disorder and the benefits of getting kids back outside. And we just had a range of speakers talking about how do we best do that, and how do we get diverse, people of diverse backgrounds out into nature to experience all the benefits of that.
That's great. That's really good to hear. I think a lot of organizations are moving that direction over the last decade or two, and we're starting to see people in this field of more diverse background, which is great. You mentioned the fire ecology portion. And those 4 fires, or those 2 fires you mentioned, the Zaca, the Jesucita, the Whittier, and the Thomas fire, are all in the Los Padres forest. What kind of service did you provide for the recovery of those fire areas?
Well, so I described our Botanical Black Holes project, and what came out of that was a series of recommendations of weeds we could target to eradicate, and other areas where we can control them and protect rare plant populations. And some of those recommendations are already being implemented by the Forest Service, by their botanists. They have limited capacity, and so we're also working. We actually are just pulling in contracts for 2 new projects in the Los Padres that are related to that, working on habitat restoration, and we're working to get more funds and overcome some obstacles to implementing more of them right here in our backyard in the Jesucita fire. So implementing those suggestions, and then in the Thomas fire, we're essentially doing the exact same thing, but with some added layers. So we're hiking around again on all of the accessible trails and mapping the weeds and the rare plants. But this time we're using some apps on our phones, which makes it simpler and quicker. And we're engaging community scientists in this task to see, okay, how many people can we get helping us hike these trails and looking for these plants, and how much training do they have to have already, how much botany knowledge, how much can they help us, and is this changing them too, kind of taking away what we call plant blindness, really looking at the plants in a new way, and telling which ones are native and which ones are weeds, and using iNaturalist, which is such an amazing tool. You can just take a picture of a plant and put it online, and then people tell you what it is, and there's even an AI component where it can suggest what those things are. And so it's just really a cool gateway to people understanding and appreciating biodiversity, and we're asking the question, can this be used as a tool to help us do this kind of mapping, because fires are getting more frequent and larger, and it's just an awful lot of work, and there's rarely enough funding to do this kind of work, to look for these problem areas, and then do the habitat restoration.
You said how much it costs to handle these fires, and as we're seeing it, while we're recording this, there's probably 30 fires across California and Oregon. So, yeah, we're feeling it right now. It's probably see the orange haze outside.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to mention that the community science program was another thing we kind of forgot to talk about in terms of the engaging the community. And it's like we talk about community science programs a lot with other people we've talked to, and it's just we love highlighting it because it's just a great way to get people who could they work at a bank, or they whatever they do for a job, they spend their free time in helping out with conservation and getting excited about plants or animals or whatever. But what is it about native plants, especially in California, and maybe even you guys' region of study, why are, and this is kind of a vague question, but why are native plants important?
I love that question. I'm so glad you asked it.
Good.
Uh, and it relates to that plant insect interactions, thing that I study. And it's because native plants are biodiversity. They're the base of the food web. They're the on land. They're the main organisms that photosynthesize and provide food for everyone else. And it's not the weeds that are bringing biodiversity. It's all those plants that have evolved in that area, and they've evolved with all those insects, and the right size and the right shape and the right hairs in the right place on those pollinators to pollinate those different plants, and it's a wondrous thing. But like I said, they're the base of the food web, and if I can approach it a different way, half of our world's biodiversity is insects and other invertebrates, and a lot of them are herbivores, right? And so if you picture yourself an herbivore and you're eating on this plant, well, it's got all kinds of defenses against you. It's an arms race. They've got chemicals, they've got, spines, they've got waxy surfaces and all kinds of things. And so it takes specialists to get past those, those barriers, right? So now we have diversity of plants, we've got a diversity of insects and pollinators and things too. And that's basically forming the food source for all of these other things, for the lizards and the birds, that really rely on insects as a protein source, especially when they're breeding, and it just on up from there. So it takes all kinds. It takes that diversity to form that web of life, and all the services that we really rely on as humans, like holding our soil in place and providing clean air and clean water. And it's just little appreciated how fundamental that is for our existence and survival and thriving on this planet.
Personally, I started off in this field because I love wildlife, because it's easiest to, I don't know, connect to for me, especially birds. And as I've, over the last decade, kind of worked through my career, I've gotten more and more interested in plants. And it's because of what you talked about. It's that botanical arms race. And that interaction where they're kind of constantly fighting each other is, I find so interesting. And how, when you start to see how it like expands colors and shapes and how the world is actually shaped, it's fascinating. And it just, the more I see it, the more I get into it. Yeah.
I got into it through a love of critters too, when I just have always just loved nature and especially animals. And when it came time to go to grad school, I thought, oh, okay, I could, in my simplistic worldview at the time, I could study mountain lions or oak trees. And, am I going to go for plants or animals? And I realized that it's really the plants that provide the habitat for everything else. It starts there. So habitat restoration is all about the plants. If you're restoring habitat for seabirds, it's about getting nesting habitat back and cover from predators and all that. So it really starts there.
Yeah, that's funny. I had a very similar experience, and I was always really same thing. Everyone says they don't want to be a marine biologist because they like whales, or I liked raptors because they're big and they're fast and they can eat things or kill things with their face. And it's exciting, but when you actually start to see it now, I have a permit for the El Segundo blue butterfly, which is like, I never cared about insects ever until maybe 2-3 years ago. And when you start to see it, the world opens up, and it's pretty cool. And so I guess that was kind of my next question is, what is it about plants for you that, what was it that turned on that switch? Because obviously, when you're going into university, you're still kind of open to things. And then as you go to grad school steps and master's and PhD, you kind of need to, at least enjoy it, just because it's really difficult.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, plants are wondrous. They're beautiful. Everyone loves gardening. Just that growth and that new life and the food for everything else, and the flowers are beautiful, and seeing the different plants when you're out on a hike, it's all wonderful. And a lot of my friends just, were born loving plants. For me, it was born loving animals, and realizing that it all comes down to the plants if you want to create that habitat.
Where did you grow up? And, I guess, what is it that kind of, as you mentioned when it comes to engaging in mentoring, at some point, you probably had that in your life, whether it was just natural or you had a mentor say, hey, I think you're really going to like this. What was it that kind of made you, that flipped that switch in your head that made you want to go into this kind of work?
Yeah, for me, it was actually really late. I grew up in Lompoc, which is in northern Santa Barbara County, a kind of rural community. Grew up on the edge of town, so I was always playing in the ditches or on the hills or in the vacant lots and playing with critters. So it was just kind of an innate love of nature, but I had no scientists in my life at all. I didn't know what these things were. I didn't know their names. I collected, weird dead things, just because I was curious about it, but I didn't have a lot of mentorship or resources. So my first major was actually art and design, and that's what my bachelor's degree is in. I thought I wanted to be maybe a nature photographer, National Geographic or something like that. I had a minor in geography. Quickly realized that wasn't really the life for me, or maybe even my strength, and got a master's degree in biogeography. Thought, okay, maybe I'll be a professor. Really liked that angle, but ended up working as a plant ecologist on Catalina Island for 8 years. And it was really there that I realized that I really missed the foundation I didn't have of that hard biology. I had made up a lot of classes, but there was some things that I felt were missing. So I went back to school and got a doctorate in ecology. And that's when I really found my mentors and my people, I would say. I think kids like hearing my story because, a lot of us are born not knowing what we want to do, and we take weird paths, and just hearing that it's okay. Just keep following, your, it sounds cheesy, following your heart, just keep looking, keep pushing for that thing that drives you, that's your niche, and you'll get there.
We want to our tagline is find optimism through science. Most everything you hear about conservation in the news, or the environment in news, is terrible. Like, hey, fires, climate change, whatever it is. But we're trying to show people like you and your organization that this is literally the only reason you exist, is to conserve rare plants and native plants and everything that you've already mentioned. I feel like that's perfectly exemplified with what you kind of already talked about, because you have a huge team of geneticists to ecosystem, ecologists. With that said, I guess, what is it that gives you hope moving forward? Because, as we've kind of already said, it's difficult to be into this position and get all the degrees you have. What is it that gives you hope, and what is it that kind of keeps you moving forward?
Well, in short, I think it's the youth of today. I think they're really empowered, and when I go to speak at a university class, and I see the enthusiasm and the determination, that gives me hope that things are changing. I think the important thing is, one of the most important barriers to biodiversity conservation is that people are less and less connected to nature, and so they don't care about conserving it. And so I think just one of the most fundamental things that we can do is just get people back out in nature and experience all the benefits of it, just reducing anxiety and exercising outdoors and the clean air, and appreciating that biodiversity, all the different plants and animals, getting them involved with iNaturalist. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do, is just re-engage people to nature. And one of the things that's not on our website yet is how important it is that we can create habitat at home. It's a great way for people to re-engage with nature by planting native plants and creating habitat right there in their own backyards, and watch as the life colonizes. It happens every time I move. I start, I take out the lawn and I plant native plants, and then you just see the bugs and the lizards and the birds all coming in. It works, and it's fun, and figuring out who those things are is just really great for the soul and also for the planet. We can really soften our impact in cities by doing that. If a third of us did that, it would really make a difference, because that's one of the number one threats to biodiversity, is just development, taking that land out of a natural state and into cities or farms.
Dr. Knapp, thank you so much for joining us today. You keep doing the great work that you and the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden are doing. If you don't mind, can you share where we can find your organization on, online, social media, or physically when we're allowed to do that?
Sure. We're in Santa Barbara at the top of Mission Canyon Road, 1212 Mission Canyon. You can find us online at www.sbbg.org.
Yeah,
All right.
great.
Well, thank you guys for your interest and your time. It's even though I'm an introvert, I really appreciate being able to get our story out there.
We'd like to thank Dr. Knapp again for taking the time to talk with us about the amazing work that the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden does. Now please check out their website and follow them on social media at SB Botanic Garden. Producers on this episode are Austin and Taylor Parker. Music was provided by A Picture Book Studios. Please like, comment, and subscribe before you go if you haven't already. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.